Paul's game has come a long way. He's a bad boy. He's got all the tools to be one of the greats. Kobe Bryant. If I were to say some words to describe Paul George's career, it's unwanted, squandered, and forgotten. But PG is an enigma that's impossible to identify in the NBA's zeitgeist. Regardless of the numbers and spoken praise, his worth remains unquantifiable. Because on one hand, you have one of the best two-way forwards of the last decade. George's game is perfectly tailored for the pro level, with countless young players citing him as the model for their own play style. On the other hand, given context, you have the journey of a vagabond that's accumulated to dust and ash at every stop, and no place to call home. But this wasn't always the case. Far in the past, a remnant echo of an era long gone. There was a time when a team, no, a state, had placed all of their hopes and dreams upon Paul George's shoulders.
Here comes George, got the step and stuffs one move and counts on the foul.
We are seeing a superstar in the making.
2013, swag culture was at its peak, Vine ruled the internet, Cooper Flag was 7, and the NBA was experiencing a transition of the guard as Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and other legends of the 2000s descended the mountain. A new generation of youngsters began their ascent to the summit. While dynasties fell from their thrones, these eager claimants marched onwards, hungry to fill the vacancy. Down in South Beach, Florida, the aptly named Heatles shook the NBA landscape with their formation. Their reign naturally presented challengers, and none posed a greater threat than the Indiana Pacers. In 2013, the air in Naptown had the scent of aspiration. Pacers fans had patiently weathered the rocky conditions that followed the closure of the Reggie Miller days, and were now approaching a new saga with ultimate glory seemingly over the horizon. Their captain at the helm was Paul George, a 22-year-old small forward out of Fresno State who they selected 10th overall back in the 2010 draft. Paul had blossomed into an all-star, attaining both All-NBA and All-Defensive selections. He'd firmly secured his status as one of the brightest young phenoms in the sport. He could do it all. This was number 24 Paul George when he was doing 360 windmills and shit. He generated offense on all three levels and accepted the challenge on defense, guarding the best players on the court. PG at his apex, which we'll soon discuss, was one of the most complete basketball players of all time. Like water, his versatility and balanced arsenal at such a budding age compelled everyone to anoint him the future face of the league. Indiana emulated their superstars' meteoric rise, ascending to the top of the Eastern Conference. They had a defensive anchor at the 5 with Roy Hibbert, prime Lance Stevenson and all his shenanigans, George Hill, and veteran David West. If the Miami Heat's run at the top hadn't coincided with this team's peak, we'd have witnessed the finals run from the Pacers a decade in advance. Unfortunately for them, timing and inexperience slayed the beast as their flame was snuffed out by the Heat in 2012, 13, and 14, the latter being 2 consecutive conference finals. At 23, George had stood inches from a trip to the NBA Finals. The novice's success under duress had cemented the Fresno alum as a postseason riser. P was built for the playoffs.
A little bit too fast for his own good. Nice contest, but Paul George suffering what appears to be an injury.
He broke his leg. In the summer of 2014, during a Team USA scrimmage, Paul George suffered one of the most gruesome injuries in basketball, breaking the entirety of his lower right leg. He was undoubtedly sidelined for the 2015 season. In 2016, a year after his tragedy, PG changed his number from 24 to 13, signaling a new chapter in his life. His return to an all-world form was masked in uncertainty. Injuries of this severity have ruined countless careers. I mean, stepping on the court again would have been a miracle. In the 2015-16 season, not only did Paul George regain his all-star trajectory, he surpassed every expectation, putting together a career year. A feat few may ever replicate. If the fans hadn't adored him already, which they did, upon his arrival, the king in nap was the one and only PG-13. But we all know the truth about fairy tales. The real ones never end well. By the time PG had returned, Indiana's window had closed. To his lament, the core had slowly withered away, leaving him as the last man standing. That love from a small market can intoxicate a homegrown talent. It's so potent, most simply can't resist. Unfortunately for Indiana, their golden boy was more self-preserving than selfless. There were already questions about his leadership, as he had a habit of throwing people under the bus. He was a born hooper, but he wasn't a born leader. George's cunning anticipated the decline, and he was ready to dodge out of town, much to the absolute distress and disgust of the Pacers faithful. On June 30th, 2017, Paul George was traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder in exchange for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. Indiana got 20 years of Reggie's devotion. They couldn't stomach this oathbreaker, booing him mercilessly in his return. But alas, the book had closed on his story in Indiana. Now PG would have to reestablish himself down south. The injury in 2014 altered a great deal of George's game. 24 PG was an animal attacking the rack, but that transition to 13 unlocked the harmonious offense we associate with Paul George. And as a member of the Thunder, the fruits of his labor would all materialize in the 2019 season. 28 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals per game on near 60% true shooting. These statistics are insane no matter the circumstance, but to do it as the co-pilot to prime Russell Westbrook is unfathomable. Everything first team, third in MVP voting, also third in Defensive Player of the Year voting, a near perfect platinum rendition, a 6'9" small forward who had zero discernible weaknesses. This was that apex. This was MVPG, the guy who everyone thought would be the face of the NBA. Regrettably, his greatness was short-lived, unnoticed on the grandest stage. No one remembers his averages in the Thunder's sole playoff series that year. They don't recall PG dropping 36 in an elimination game, because all they recount from that game is, by his own words, the bad shot that sent the Thunder into a rebuild and concluded Paul's run in Oklahoma City. The lone silver lining for PG is this: OKC fans don't hate him. Quite the contrary. When he departed, Sam Presti extracted the motherlode of hauls, parlaying a single trade into the foundation of a possible dynasty. There's no point reading all this out. The Thunder parted ways with an MVP candidate in George for a gazillion draft picks and the actual current MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But hindsight is blah blah. This trade was preceded by the bombshell acquisition of Kawhi Leonard by the LA Clippers. The Claw and PG-13, along with a loaded roster, spelled one thing: championship. Yeah, that never happened. The more appropriate descriptor of the Paul George Kawhi Leonard saga would be failure. In 2020, they squandered the opportunity to play the Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, blowing a 3-1 lead to the Denver Nuggets. We were promised the Battle of LA in the bubble. All we got was Paul George hitting the side of the backboard.
George, way off.
PG's play that postseason was particularly abysmal, coming on the heels of him ironically dubbing himself Playoff P after choking a 3-1 advantage, and in the wake of his asinine remarks the previous season about Damian Lillard's iconic shot over him. His standing with the public plummeted. the perception of Paul George had completely shifted from a once exciting young superstar with killer instincts to an unclutched, arrogant, sore loser. They had another legitimate shot in 2021, but those dreams ended with Kawhi's knee injury. Those were the only 2 years the Clippers could have competed for an NBA title. Once again, the gates of glory had slammed shut in Paul's face. In 2024, Paul George's career had passed him by. One moment you're 23 with 2 conference finals trips under your belt. The next you're 33 with a podcast and an expiring contract. In the offseason of 2024, he demanded identical terms to that of Kawhi Leonard's deal, something he probably shouldn't ask for anymore. George felt as though he'd earned that privilege after all he'd done for the organization. The Clippers obviously refused, so off he went to Philadelphia, the only team stupid and desperate enough to give an injury-prone, washed superstar $200 million. Yet again, PG stumbled at the door on his way out. Clippers fans weren't pleased with anything about him. Now, Clips fans have a problem with everything related to that dumpster fire, but especially George. PG is incredibly gifted, and at his peak, he's a juggernaut. Yet the guy disappears whenever the lights are on. And then we got Podcast P formulating some excuse to avoid accountability. He's never been a leader, nor does he possess the intangibles you'd expect from someone of his caliber. Still, he's a wizard with the basketball and a known hard worker. It's like the guy's an ultra talent who can switch gears at will, but chooses to do the bare minimum and collect his check. The boring truth is that injuries prevented George from maximizing his talents, but passionate disdain, which is exactly how every fan base feels about Paul George, makes one blame his mentality. PG has an affinity for rubbing people the wrong way. Today, as a Sixer, he looks washed. Sure, he's improved from his form last season, but it ain't worth 50 M's a year. And yes, he can go on his podcast and promise an incredible comeback once his injuries dissipate, but that's always been the case, and things don't suddenly turn around in your mid-30s. In a way, he's a measuring stick. He's not a good player, but a great one, but he never crossed that final barrier to legendary status. He's made his money, and his individual accomplishments speak for themselves. Paul George played out a fantastic career as a superstar, all while pleasing only one person in the process: himself. Thanks for watching.